So fascinating. When I found out you were on a cold case, I'm like, we have to talk about it because it's so amazing to me how investigators do what they do. It's
when
fascinating.
I heard I was on the cold case, I mean, when I heard there was one out there, I'm like, oh, pick me. I think it's fascinating. I think it's incredible how technology and DNA and all that testing has evolved so much that they can go back 37 years and say he did it.
And that's amazing that they're dedicated to it, too. Yes. The fact that it's not like, it's whatever, who cares now. The fact that they're committed to still getting justice, that's the stuff I love.
These cold case detectives. Right. One of the reporters in the news conference said, what's the message? And the detective says, the message is we don't give up. And that's the message you have to put out there.
Right.
This happened in 1978 on, back at 55th Avenue in Northern. And everyone says, so back then.
37 years ago.
37 years ago. And back then, 55th Avenue in Northern, dark, rural, one way, each way road, and there's still a lot of questions as to why this 21-year-old beautiful girl, I don't know if you have a picture. Yes.
I'm going to go pull that
Her
up
name,
now.
She was going to ASU and Glendale, 21 years old, and as to why she, for some reason, we don't know why, stopped in the middle of 55th Avenue. Now that's, there is her picture.
Yeah, I'm going to pull that up.
Her name is Susan Schmidt.
There she is.
That looks like it's back in the day. That's how we took our
I remember
our high school graduation pictures look like that. But 21 years old, and a jogger, 8:30 at night the jogger discovered her in her car.
Okay.
1976 Toyota Celica in the middle of 55th Avenue, slumped there with several gunshot wounds. Passenger window rolled down. Her purse and all of her valuables still there. That's the car. Just there in the middle of the road. And when, use the word baffling, you don't hear cops use the word baffling very often. But if something goes unsolved for 37 years, they are baffled. And they said at the time, we are baffled. We can't figure it out. No enemy. She'd gone shopping. They didn't take her purse or any of the things that she had bought. But they just, literally shot her, left her there. And this is how, try to get your head around this. So the jogger comes along. So you come along this kind of scene. What do? You reach for your cell phone. It's 1978.
There's no such thing as
You know what he does?
I don't know.
He jogs to a fire station that was several blocks away
to call 911.
To get them. He didn't even call. He was at the fire station to get them to come back, and
Wow.
And I said, wow. I mean, we just don't even think of how things have changed in the last 40 years as to how you would go and get help. But what's interesting is we were Cool TV 10 back then, and we covered it, and we were able to go back and get footage from 1978. We sent a photographer out that day and got footage of the area and the car. And it's just kind of eerie. I got here in 81, so I got here 3 years after.
So are we going to be able to see that video?
Yes, I put it in my 5 o'clock story.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
I know. It was very eerie, and it was, I'm going through paper this morning. If you can imagine, how usually we search for things these days. In 2015, you look in the computer. I'm looking through paper logs this morning going, I know that it's got to be here somewhere.
Wow.
Then we went into a creepy basement that was dusty and hot, and we got
over in this building.
We got the tape and pulled it up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there it is, Glendale Homicide. But here's what's weird. So this guy, they say he didn't know her.
I'm going to pull up his picture.
Yeah.
There he is.
He's 54 years old. And
now or at the time?
Now.
Oh, well, that would make sense.
He was
now.
17 at the time. He was 17
and she was 21.
at the time he allegedly did this. Did not know her. Witnesses at the scene said they think they saw a man outside the car doing something in the car, 17 years old. We don't know the backstory, but, her family at the time, obviously devastated.
Right.
They didn't want to talk because, how relieved must they be to find this?
Does she still have family members here in Arizona?
I believe they were in Payson at the time. Okay. They may still be in Payson. So we're looking for people who knew her. At the time of the murder. Okay. No, they're in Glendale then.
Okay, and now...
She went to high school in Glendale, and then she went to ASU. I believe her family moved to Payson. We have not reached out to them yet.
Right.
But, devastated. I mean, and he, from what I can figure out, was class of 1978 at Buckeye High School. It's kind of an unusual name. So if you think you know this guy, his name, or may have known one, Edward Meinhold, Meinhold, class of 78, Buckeye High School, from what I can figure out. How these two came together on 55th Avenue on that dark night 37 years ago, what happened, that, if he did do it, he allegedly did it. Glendale police say forensic evidence is what they found, some kind of physical evidence in the car.
Amazing.
And they just started looking at this again in April. Because they have a lot of cold cases, and they go through them. So these cold case detectives, they just started looking at it again in April. They won't give us details. They don't have him back yet. He should be extradited back, hopefully, in the next week or two from Virginia.
Right.
But, they had their own tragedy. I'm not calling Virginia for anything today. They're like, we should call Virginia. I'm like, Virginia is not the place to call for favors today. So we left them alone, and we didn't reach out to them, obviously, because of the tragedy that happened there. So, as things change, then we'll reach out, and maybe we can get some more information on Mr. Meinhold. But fascinating story.
What is this picture of? I saw
this is a picture.
From the folder too.
This is a picture of what 55th Avenue south of Northern looked like at the time. And you see those cones
right there
on the side. I believe that is where her car would have been. But,
you can just see how rural of an area it is.
It is, and desolate. So a guy comes jogging along. Something made her stop. And I said, why did she stop?
Maybe he acted like he was asking for directions.
Flagged her down. But why did he do that? It's just... It's going to be,
awful.
Yeah, I'm looking for, I will follow this.
Wounds?
Multiple. She was shot several times. I know. Beautiful girl.
So
Makes me so sad.
Go back and look
it
at
absolutely
her picture.
does. Yeah. And so that shows how committed they are. When you get these cold case detectives, and they're not excitable and all that. They're very calm, very calculating, very into the minutia, very excited about the technology that's coming their way.
Right.
They have a whole system where they can put it into the system, and if a guy has been arrested, then it'll send them back hits. Ding, 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 ding on this guy's DNA. And I'm not saying that's what happened, because they're being very close to the vest. They're like, well, we can't say much about how we actually tracked him down. Physical evidence could have been a hair sample from the car, but after all this time. So those detectives back in 1978, we talked about them. What a good job they did.
It's amazing.
What a good job they did in preserving evidence and keeping it all these years. So 37 years later, it ends up nailing this guy. Are you kidding me?
So crazy.
Great.
I want
stuff.
to ask you this question, because Tess is asking it in the chat room. So a trial, what does a cold case trial look like? Everything in the evidence is so old, different. People have moved on. How do they do that?
I think, who knows, witnesses may still be around, and that's what I would wonder too. I said, how do you get physical evidence from 37 years ago? And they would not say it was DNA. Could have been a hair, DNA from hair, could have been, but I think that is still valid and pure. It's still science. Just because it's old, it's still science, and it's still pointed to him. And they say that he lived in the area, and could have, it's not like he's from Virginia. He lived in that area in 1978.
Right.
And they have flown to Virginia and interviewed him. And, a grand jury indicted him, and they arrested him last Friday. Yeah. So it'll move along, I think, a lot like a regular trial would. But I don't think that the evidence, because it's old, I don't think the science is compromised because of that. I think the science is just as strong.
I can't wait to see your report at 5. So you're going to actually have the footage from back in 1978.
Yes. Don't get too excited. I was excited
so
when we
cool.
found it because it was dusty. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And the photographer says, I don't think we have a machine that plays that anymore.
What kind of tape was it? Like a beta?
It's called a 3/4 inch tape. It's even older than a beta.
Oh.
So
are they those ones that were like this big?
It was very big.
Yeah, and it's like a rectangle like that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost 40 years old, but God bless her, God bless her family, and God bless those guys who keep, and gals, detectives who work that cold case and keep doing it.
Right. Speaking of which, we have that full interview you did with the detectives. So
yeah.
I'll play that for you.
This is a clip.
Whoa. So I'm going to play that for you guys now so you
Yeah,
guys can hear
it's
just
fascinating
straight from the
stuff.
detective in terms of how they figured it all out. So, lower the volume. Okay.
He's a cold case detective, and his name is Roger Geisler.
Okay.
This is a cold case, or were you an original investigating detective?
I was 17 when this first started, so no, I wasn't the original.
Okay.
Original, but yes, I did receive this as a cold case.
Okay. Tell me what you got and why it was so perplexing. I've read several articles that talked about how baffling it was initially.
The initial investigation was extremely baffling because you had a 21-year-old young lady who, for no reason, her vehicle was stopped in the roadway and was shot and killed. What's baffling about it is in the original investigation, all of the leads were just, there were no leads that directed us to one specific person, and all of those were exhausted. Several investigators and detectives over the years have worked numerous leads, and everything was exhausted. I started working on this case with Detective Clayton back in 2002, and where we did some work on it, and again in 2007 we worked some leads, and then just recently with our newest lead.
Can you explain about how do you examine again the evidence?
What we do is typically with any of our cold cases, we periodically review the cases and we look at what technologies have changed, what evidence we may be able to develop through these cases, and based on that, it leads us in a direction to go. And so this is one of those cases that was reviewed, and were able to get lucky and find some physical evidence that led us to Mr. Meinhold.
So basically technology is what helped you?
It's a combination of technology. I mean, obviously in 1978, we didn't think about DNA. DNA wasn't around, and as time progressed, DNA becomes more prevalent. Other things, we still have lots of other different kinds of physical evidence that have progressed over the years. The use of cell phones and technology in those directions, and so there's a lot of things that point any cold case investigator into solving cases.
Was Meinhold in the system and you got some kind of hit when you put that DNA evidence in?
Well, it wasn't specifically DNA evidence, but we do have physical evidence that gave us his name, yes.
So he was in some kind of system already, hadn't been arrested in Virginia or somewhere?
He was identified through the physical evidence, yes.
Okay.
What does it mean to finally get something like this behind you?
What it means to me, it's important to me because I'm able to give the family some answers as to what may have occurred. And I think that's the most rewarding and rewarding part about my job is being able to tell the family.
What can you say about the suspect?
What can I say about the suspect? He was, obviously he was about 17 years old when this occurred. He's just, on with his life at this point in time.
But he knew the victim, this is a target, or was random? Or?
At this point, I can show no connection between him and our Susan Schmidt.
Any crimes since then for Meinhold?
For Meinhold, there's a little bit of history, but not a lot. No, nothing.
Did he leave almost immediately after the Schmidt murder?
Leave the Phoenix area? It was sometime after.
Sometime so he was here for a while.
For a period of time, yes.
Can you talk a little about the crime itself?
The crime itself. Well, back in 1978, 55th Avenue, just south of Northern, was kind of a secluded area. You had the mall west of 55th Avenue and some farm fields that were east of 55th Avenue. To the south were some houses, and to the north a golf course. But that specific area was just a two-lane road, one going each direction. So it was a very secluded and a dark road at that time of night when this occurred.
8:30?
8:30-ish, 8:30-ish, somewhere in that area.
23rd?
March 22nd of 1978.
She's leaving the Valley West Mall.
That's what it appears, is that she was leaving the Valley West Mall when this occurred, yes. I wasn't there. I wish I could say why she stopped or what stopped the car, but something stopped the car on that road when this occurred, yes.
And she was shot how many times?
Quite several.
So I'm sorry, can you say something about the motive? She was robbed, or?
At this point, the motive, can be a variety of things, or we can derive what it could be. I really don't know. I wish I had that information as to what the motive may have been, but I really don't have the exact motive.
Can you explain a little bit where did you locate this guy? How did you locate him? What did he say when he was arrested?
Well, again, with the changes in technology, there's social media, there's a lot of outlets that are public and law enforcement sensitive that we check to locate people. And so we do that, and that led me to Edward and where he lived.
How long was he on your radar?
About a month and a half.
What was the family's reaction?
Obviously they're emotional. This is their daughter. This is something that has troubled them for years, and I can definitely understand being their daughter. I think getting this news was emotional for them. It brings up a lot of memories, and so I just support them in everything.
What's next? When he's going to be extradited to Arizona?
Yes, at some point he'll be extradited back here, and we'll start the legal process here.
Can you talk about the one thing that really locked in the suspect, that you knew that this was the guy that you needed to go pick up?
The physical evidence that we developed.
Can you talk about that, what that physical evidence was?
Physical evidence from within the car. Physical evidence can be a variety of things, again, like DNA, fingerprints, those type of things. I really can't comment on the exact evidence at this point because we are still in a process, but the physical evidence was very strong for me.
We're just trying to broadly connect the trails. So
I understand.
Physical evidence leads broadly to a name?
Well, physical evidence, and when we're talking physical evidence, like I said, DNA, fingerprints, those things lead us to a specific person. So, the evidence may be broad, but it will often identify one specific person, and it's this situation, it was the physical evidence that identified a person being Mr. Meinhold.
So I guess this is the oldest cold case in Glendale Police. How do you guys feel about this? What is the message to them?
Well, the message is that we don't give up. We have several cases that are right now unresolved, and we always asking the public's cooperation in calling us and giving us that information, even if you think that the case has been resolved. In some cases, people may think, well, that case is old and we know it's been resolved, and it hasn't. So we always ask for the public's assistance in helping us with any of our cases. And we have a website through the city that's a cold case. We have cases that are highlighted within there, and we ask the public's assistance for any help.
Right now, he's the only suspect in this case?
He is.
Are there any others?
No.
How many other cold cases do you guys have or considered cold cases?
We have several cold cases. For a number, I'd say at least more than 50 at this point, over 30, 40 years.
So would you say technology helped you solve this case?
I would say technology helped us solve this case, most definitely. And again, that technology being, and even as time goes on from now, technology will improve and improve what we do and able to give us some resolve to these families.
Did you find you had a lot of stuff saved from that cold case from the 78?
We do. Well, we saved all of our evidence and was able to help us.
So in your point of view, the detectives did a good job back then, just didn't have the technology to solve this?
My opinion, the detectives did an excellent job. I couldn't ask for anything better. I wouldn't be standing here today in this position without the work of those prior detectives before me.
Was the suspect
Absolutely.
ever considered a suspect before?
No. It wasn't until this new information came forward.
So you say he didn't know the victim, but he lived in the area? He was a guy, a resident of that area?
He was living in the Phoenix area, yes, during that time.
Where is he right now?
Virginia.
He's still-
Yes, he is.
When do you
It's
think
still.
he'll be back?
That's a legal process. I honestly don't know. It's very dependent on, obviously, a variety of factors.
All right, so that is a wrap.